The reaction to the lifting immersion has been tremendous. It's been extremely well received, both within the BP community and within the broader BP community, in the contracting community. They've all seen it as a really tremendous teaching tool, and it's extraordinary the result that we've delivered. The next immersion is driving safety. It is the biggest issue that the group has in the matter of safety. More people are killed and injured through driving-related incidents than in any other area. And in fact, in one day in November of 2003, we had 4 people killed across the world in driving-related accidents. It is the group's biggest issue. I think every one of us has been affected by a vehicle accident, either directly or because we know someone or know someone who knows someone who's either been injured or killed in a vehicle accident. And I'm no exception. When I was in South America, I had a personal assistant whose 16-year-old son was killed in a vehicle accident because he wasn't wearing a safety belt. And that certainly made me realise that we all have an opportunity to do something about this. This immersion, like the lifting immersion, is based on learning, practicing and testing. Everyone needs to take it, adapt it to their local situation and ensure that everyone in the business unit and everyone involved in doing work with the business unit has had the opportunity to learn, to practice and then has been tested. Driving safety needs to become a way of life for everyone in BP and everyone who works with BP. Driving safety needs to become a way of life for life.
Life can end instantly. Nothing changes as quickly as the situations we're faced with whilst driving. In no other part of our lives do we depend on the skill and behaviour of so many others on a daily basis. If they or we act unsafely, the effects can be devastating. The damage that can be done in an accident has a direct connection to the size and speed of the vehicles involved. Within E&P operations, we drive more than 400 million kilometres a year, the equivalent of 27 times around the world every day. Different vehicles in different terrains with a different set of possible hazards every minute. In the lifting practicing program, we saw a team of people spending a significant amount of time planning a lifting operation. The potential hazards were carefully identified and mitigated. With driving safety, we reduced the risk by investing in driving skills and equipment and by planning for environmental conditions. But third-party behaviour and the environment are constantly changing. Driving requires the ability to anticipate and respond safely to those ever-changing hazards. The only way to completely factor out risk is for that journey not to happen at all. Road accidents are the single largest cause of fatalities in the BP group and the main cause of third-party fatalities involving BP. The impact of a momentary loss of concentration or change in hazards can be life-shattering. Any of us can instantly become another tragic statistic.
This car was travelling at 35 miles per hour. Had it been travelling at 30, it would have stopped here. Think. Slow down.
Ray Thibbert, a Dial Oil Services tank truck driver, had driven all of his working life. He was so conscientious, he was used as a mentor to many of the younger drivers in the company. On the evening of the 5th of December 2002, Ray left a BP Canada well site. He'd had a normal day and was showing no signs of fatigue when he was checked off the site. He was on his way to a facility to dispose of inhibited water. Ray never arrived.
I first heard of the event in the early hours of the morning on the 5th of December. I'd been in my new role as performance unit leader in Canada for only 3 days. If ever I was in any doubt as to my priorities and my accountability as a leader within BP, this was the starkest reminder.
Ray had finished his job on location and he had left location and he'd gotten a few kilometers down the road off of site, and for some reason lost control of his truck and went sideways into the ditch and was ejected out of the vehicle. The vehicle landed on top of him and he was killed instantly.
It was probably about 8 o'clock in the evening, 9 o'clock. I was going to go clean out a test vessel for BP on location, and I never made it there because I come upon an accident scene with Ray. I seen the truck on its side, and the engine had stalled already, but the lights and everything were still shining bright, so he hadn't been rolled over for very long, I didn't think.
Ray was actually pinned underneath the cab, with his body half in the cab and half out of the cab. We learnt afterwards that Ray was not wearing a seatbelt, and as much as you study those pictures, you can't help but believe if Ray had been wearing a seatbelt that day, he'd have walked away from that incident.
The seatbelt wasn't done up when the truck rolled, and for us, we couldn't believe that because he was the type of person that wouldn't drive 100 feet without his seatbelt on, even if he had to do it up and take it off 20 times on one job. It always was on.
An ambulance driver that got there very early on the scene, he had removed a small pail wrench from Ray's hand. This pail wrench may have fell on the floor while he was driving, and he was unable to reach it and pick it up. And he chose to remove his seatbelt, reach for the pail wrench, and that distraction caused him to leave the road and end up killed from this accident.
Well, it affected me quite a bit. Couldn't sleep for a couple of days and just didn't want to do anything.
It's a hole in the company, but it's a hole in a lot of friendships too, because these people work together all hours of the day and night, and they develop a bond and a friendship that you can't replace.
The biggest lesson I learned from the incident was that vehicles and driving was actually the most hazardous thing that most of us do in our day-to-day activities.
Obviously, this was a very preventable accident. When you look at the wreckage from this accident, arguably the truck could have been righted on its wheels, key put in the ignition, and the truck driven away, yet somebody died in it.
Here was an individual that probably followed procedures and processes and things more than most people would. It was just unimaginable. I mean, what went through our business was disbelief that this could happen to Ray.
From 2001 to August 2003, 4 members of the workforce died in driving incidents in E&P. 9 third parties died in work-related incidents, including 3 3-year-old children. 10 fatalities were reported in joint ventures where BP does not operate. Another 8 fatalities were reported by business units in non-BP work-related incidents. Of 109 total driving incidents, people died in 26 of them. Incidents occurred in all vehicle types and all terrain. Driving safety hazards are hard to manage, but interpretation of data can help us to focus on key problem areas, dividing hazards into equipment, environment, driver and third-party behavior. 25 incidents involved problems with equipment or equipment failure. 30 incidents were related to environmental conditions. 83 incidents involved driver behavior, over 3/4 of all incidents. 33 incidents involved third parties. It is vital that vehicles are well maintained, fit for purpose and fit for use. Maintenance and inspection were an issue in nearly 1/4 of all incidents. Simple checks can reduce the risks. Do you check your vehicle before every journey? If you break down, are you prepared? Environmental conditions can change in seconds. Taking time to plan for all eventualities is essential. Have you planned your route to reduce hazards and checked the weather forecast for the complete journey? How will you respond to different environmental conditions? The driver is the #1 factor in incidents. 70% of all incidents involved issues with identification of and response to hazards. The influence of the driver can be split into 3 areas. The first is mental and physical state. How often have you convinced yourself you are fit to drive when you're actually tired? We must all take responsibility for assessing our own and others' fitness to drive. Driver skill levels. Training or implementation of that training has been identified as an issue in 1/3 of incidents. Do you feel confident that you have the right training? Do you need a refresher course? Driver behavior. Is your concentration fully on the road, and have you planned your journey carefully? Is your speed appropriate for the conditions? Excessive speed for the conditions has been identified as a factor in 27% of incidents. Most of the people who have died in E&P work-related incidents were third parties. How can we control the behavior of others? We can't. Which is why we have placed so much emphasis on the response to potential hazards. The most important aspect of this is to anticipate unsafe behaviors, slow down, and identify an escape route to avoid a possible collision. There is a 5th area within driving safety: the correlation between distance traveled and the number of incidents occurring. If we can reduce the number of journeys, the number of accidents will also drop. Ask yourself, is your trip really necessary?
Why?駕駛時切勿使用手提電話。
Like most victims, Julie knew her killer. It was her son. He wasn't wearing his seatbelt. After crushing her to death, he sat back down. Think, always wear a seatbelt.
Garucha Noureddin worked as a field operator on the REB field for the BP Sonatrach joint venture in Algeria. He was a well-liked and respected member of the team with many years' experience, known as a considerate and thorough worker. On the 19th of September 2002, Noureddin attended dawn prayers following a night shift. Afterwards, he drove out for a final check at a well site. He never made it there. Friends of his are here looking at the wreckage of the vehicle in which he was killed.
قبل صلاة الصبح كنت مع المرحوم نور الدين وبعد لحظات تكلمت معه ومن بعد ذهب هو إلى العمل. بعد ساعة بعد الصلاة ساعة سمعت بالحادث أنه وقع إلى المرحوم.
The regulation speed was 60 kilometers per hour. It has been estimated that Noureddin was doing over 120 kilometers per hour.
Ils ont m'appelé, j'étais 6h15. On est parti avec l'ambulance, moi et le médic Paul. Après, quand on était arrivé directement, لقينا الأخ داخل السيارة ومنحني رأسه على sur le volant. أول شيء الذي عملته on a touché son pouls, il était mort déjà.
الموت تاع نور الدين توشتني صح. كان صاحبي وعزيز عليا. ان شاء الله الحدث هذا ان شاء الله يكون عبرة للعمال هنايا تاع الشركة.
The vehicle was found on its roof. Noureddin died from severe head injuries. The business unit leader in Algeria is Dave Nagel.
When I got the call, I was stunned. And as we got more information about Noureddin, he was only 44. He was married, and he had 5 children. 5 children who now don't have a father. And it was just devastating, to be honest. What happened really across the joint venture was a realization that we needed to step into a different space. The first thing was our equipment. Could we actually verify that our equipment was safe? Do we have inspections of all of our equipment? It started with our contractors assessing speeding with speed guns and frankly dismissing people that speed. It started with putting drive-right monitors in all of the vehicles against a little bit of skepticism and resistance, to be honest, from a number of people. It was an extra cost. And now our contractors want to use them worldwide because they can see what it's telling them. Probably everyone knows someone who's died in a vehicle accident. And I suspect that when you look back, almost all, if not all of those were preventable. And what we're talking about here is actually keeping people alive. People we know, people we care about. I would hope that there's a lesson out of Noureddin's death that carries on and keeps other people alive.
If we are to achieve the BP aspiration of 0 fatalities, complacency must be ruled out. We must make sure that we learn the lessons from previous incidents. The lessons tell us to plan the route and assess the risks of our journeys. Drivers should be appropriately assessed, licensed, trained, and medically fit to drive. Vehicles should be fit for purpose and maintained in safe working order. Loads should be secured correctly and should not exceed the manufacturer's specification and legal limits for the vehicle. The number of passengers should not exceed the manufacturer's specification for the vehicle. Seatbelts should be worn by all occupants whilst the vehicle is in motion. Safety helmets should be worn by riders and passengers of motorcycles and similar vehicles. Drivers should be rested and alert and not be under the influence of alcohol or drugs or any other substance that could impair the ability to drive. Mobile phones and two-way radios should not be used while driving. By implementing this, we will significantly reduce the risk of further tragic loss of life on the road.
I believe there's been a step change. It's not been viewing driving as getting to and from work or getting to and from a site or a lease. It's been viewing driving as the most dangerous thing we do within the business unit.
I used to use driving as an opportunity to do what I call recreational thinking. Thinking about problem solving, all those kinds of things. And I realized by doing that I was paying very little attention to the road. So therefore, I become the greatest risk on the road.
One of the police officers investigating said of all the thousands and thousands of vehicle incidents and fatalities he's reviewed, only one was an accident. Everybody has a role to play in preventing the incident, and behind the wheel you have a huge role to play.
It brings home the fact that safety matters, and there are rules there, and you may think that they cost a little bit, but after something like this happens, and you deal with the wife and with the daughters and things like that, you can't not afford it.